You came back. Good. Pull up a chair and try not to make a sound. This is the last whisper. Owen Marsh thought the hardest part of losing his wife was going to be sleeping in their bed alone. He was dead wrong. The hardest part came exactly 3 weeks later, at 2 in the morning, when his phone rang from a number he'd never seen before. He almost didn't pick up, but he did. And the voice that came out of that speaker was his wife's. Calm, warm, completely unbothered by the fact that she had been in the ground for 21 days. She told him what he'd eaten for dinner. She told him what he'd been thinking about before he fell asleep. And then, almost gently, she told him the exact date and time he was going to die. Owen Marsh was 43 years old and had spent most of his adult life teaching high school history in a small town in rural Pennsylvania. He and his wife Elena had lived in the same farmhouse since they got married. White, 2-story, wraparound porch, 11 acres of field that turned gold every October. No kids by choice. 2 dogs they hadn't planned on. A marriage that the people around them called genuinely happy, which is rarer than most people want to admit. Elena died on a Tuesday in September. A truck ran a red light and she didn't make it to the hospital. The whole thing was over in under a minute. Owen identified her body, drove home, sat on the porch until the sun came up, and then began doing what people do after something like that. He answered the cards, he thanked the neighbors, he kept going to work because the alternative was sitting in a house full of her things with nowhere to put any of it. 3 weeks in, he was not okay, but he was functioning. The first voicemail arrived on a Wednesday night. His phone lit up at 2:04 a.m. from a number he didn't recognize. 10 digits, no area code he knew, no name attached. He let it ring. Strangers don't call at 2 in the morning with anything you want to hear. In the morning, there was a message waiting. He played it while the coffee was brewing, expecting a wrong number or an automated spam call. What came through the speaker made him set the mug down very carefully and stand completely still. "You had the soup again tonight," the voice said. "The tomato one in the blue pot. You burned the bottom a little, but you ate it anyway. You were thinking about the summer we drove up to Maine, the way the water looked in the late afternoon light. I know you were because you kept touching your ring. I see you, Owen. I see everything you do." It was Elena's voice. Her exact rhythm, her exact phrasing, the way she always paused just a half second before a sentence landed. He played the message again, then a third time, then a fourth. By the fourth time, his hands were shaking hard enough that he dropped the mug and didn't bother picking it up. His first thought was the rational one. A recording, some kind of prank, someone with access to old videos. His second thought hit immediately after. Nobody knew about the soup. Nobody knew he'd burned it. Nobody on this earth knew what he'd been sitting there thinking about while he ate alone in his kitchen the night before. He called the number back. It rang once and then went silent. Not voicemail, not a busy signal, just silence, and then a dial tone, like the line had been quietly picked up and set right back down. Owen told himself it was grief. He told himself the brain does things when it's under that kind of pressure. It reaches, it invents, it finds patterns that aren't there because the alternative is accepting that there's nothing left to find. He went to school. He taught 2 periods on the First World War. He came home and fed the dogs and went to bed. The second voicemail came 4 nights later. This time Elena's voice was longer. She described a dream Owen had the night before, a specific dream he had not told a single person about, and frankly, would not have. She repeated back the exact words he'd said out loud in the dark bedroom at 3 in the morning when he was sure no one could hear him. And then, at the very end of the message, she said, "Don't play this for anyone yet, I'm not ready, but I will be." Owen sat on that for 2 full days. Then he called his closest friend, a man named Derek Sloan, a contractor, steady and practical, someone who'd known Owen and Elena for 15 years and was not the kind of person to panic. Owen told him about the voicemails. Derek's reaction was exactly what you'd expect: concern, skepticism, a careful suggestion about maybe talking to someone professionally. Owen played him the second message over the phone. Derek went quiet. Not the quiet of someone thinking, not the quiet of someone deciding what to say. He went silent the way a room goes silent when the power cuts out. Sudden, total, wrong. Owen said his name twice, and then he heard it. Under Derek's breathing, almost too low to catch, Derek was repeating the last 12 seconds of the message word for word, in a voice that wasn't quite his. Owen drove to Derek's house that night. He found him at the kitchen table with his phone on speaker, playing the voicemail on a continuous loop. He had been there for 6 hours. The coffee in front of him was stone cold. His eyes were open. He wasn't distressed or afraid. He looked peaceful in the way people look peaceful when they've stopped fighting something, which is not the same as being okay. His gaze was fixed at a point roughly 2 feet in front of the phone, like he was watching something materialize that Owen simply couldn't see. Owen pulled the phone off the table. Derek blinked. He looked at Owen and said slowly, in the voice of someone just breaking the surface of water, "She has more to say." Owen got him water. Derek drank it. Over the next hour, he came back most of the way, answered questions, knew where he was, recognized Owen. But something had changed behind his eyes. Not something you could name or point to. A residue. Like whatever had been in that recording had gotten into him and decided to stay. He told Owen what he'd heard underneath the words. He said it was like a frequency he hadn't known he could receive, and now that the channel was open, he didn't know how to close it. He said it felt like being watched by something patient enough to wait forever. He said he didn't want to listen again. Then he looked at the phone and said he really, really did. Owen took him to the emergency room that night. Derek's vitals were fine, cognitively normal by every mean. Sure they could run. Except twice during the examination, he stopped mid-sentence and spoke in Elena's voice. Not imitating her, not doing any kind of impression, just speaking in it, like it was a setting he'd been switched to. Full sentences about things he could not have known. The second time it happened, the nurse who heard it excused herself and did not come back into the room. Owen filed a police report the next morning. The detective who took the case was a woman named Sarah Chen, 12 years on the force, methodical, not easily rattled. She wrote everything down without changing expression and asked sharp, specific questions. She said she'd look into where the calls were originating from. She called back the following afternoon. The number didn't exist. Not unregistered, not out of service. It had never been assigned to anyone, by any carrier, anywhere in the country. There was no technical record of it having ever been a real phone number. And yet the calls had logged as completed. They had connected. They had lasted 82 and 91 seconds respectively. The records showed them plainly. The number that made them did not. Owen came home that night and found something on his kitchen counter that hadn't been there when he left. A box he didn't recognize, sitting in the middle of the counter, house locked, nothing disturbed. Inside the box, wrapped in one of Elena's scarves, was a rotary phone. Cream-colored, from sometime in the 70s, completely out of place and completely pristine. He had never seen it before in his life. He almost didn't touch it. He stood in the kitchen for a long time looking at it. Then he noticed it was warm, not from sunlight, not from a heater. Warm the way something alive is warm. He turned it over. On the bottom was a small paper tag in Elena's handwriting, a date from 3 years ago, and 4 words, "For when it's time." 3 years ago. She had written that 3 years ago, which means she had known something was coming long before the truck ran that red light, long before any of it. There was a third voicemail waiting on his phone that night. No missed call, no timestamp, no originating number, just the message sitting there, 32 seconds of audio, waiting to be opened. Owen did not open it. He sat on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets and stayed there until the dogs came and pressed against him. And even then, he stayed a while longer. He called Detective Chen in the morning and told her about the phone and the tag and the final message. She came to the house, photographed everything, bagged the rotary phone. Then she asked to hear the voicemail. Owen said no. He told her exactly what had happened to Derek, still hospitalized, still oscillating between his own voice and Elena's, still describing events he had no way of knowing. Chen pushed back the way a detective will, professional and persistent. Owen told her he understood her position, and the answer was no. Not until he knew more. Not until he could figure out why everyone who heard those recordings came out changed. Chen left. He could tell she was going to find another way in. That night, he went through a box of Elena's things he hadn't opened since the funeral. Her journal was at the bottom. He flipped to the last entry, dated 11 days before she died. She had written, "The house has been making sounds again after midnight, not pipes, not the wind. I've been trying to describe it, and the only word I keep landing on is practicing. It sounds like something is practicing, working out the shape of something it eventually wants to say. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what it means. But it hears me too. I can feel that part." Owen read that entry until the words stopped arranging themselves into meaning. She had heard it for weeks before she died. She had bought a telephone for it. She had written a note for him. She had known. Detective Chen never filed that warrant. She stopped responding to calls 2 days after her visit to the farmhouse. Her partner found her at her kitchen table, phone on speaker, completely still, eyes open, no response to her name. On her notepad, in the margins next to Owen's case details, was writing that wasn't hers. She asked to hear. Owen has not opened the final voicemail. He has 6 days left, according to the only voice that has never once been wrong. And in the farmhouse after midnight, in the hours when the field outside goes completely dark and the dogs stop moving and the old house settles into a silence that isn't empty, there is a sound he has learned to recognize. Something moving through the rooms with great care and patience, something adjusting, something that has finished learning Elena's voice entirely and has quietly, thoroughly begun working on his. Elena's journal said it had been practicing for weeks before she died, before the accident, before anyone knew anything was coming. The timing was not random. Whatever lives in that house did not wait for Elena to die before it started collecting her. It started before. It watched her first. It learned her voice, her rhythm, the particular way she paused before a sentence landed. And then it arranged things so Owen would have a reason to stay. Alone, isolated, night after night. Long enough to be learned. The farmhouse had stood for over 100 years before Owen and Elena ever moved in. Families before them, voices before them, and somewhere in the walls, in the space between what a house is and what it quietly becomes, something has been building a library no one will ever be allowed to leave. Owen still has not opened that final voicemail. Maybe he never will. Or maybe one night, when the silence gets heavy enough and the grief gets loud enough, he'll press play. And whatever comes out of the speaker will be so perfectly, completely him that he won't even realize it isn't his own voice anymore. That's the thing about something that's been practicing long enough. By the time it's ready, you can't tell the difference, and neither can anyone else.